We used clasps to remove the manhole cover, revealing a dark hole lined by a concrete tube.
懐中電灯を貸してくれ。
Reached out behind me as I stared into the gaping maw.
何か見えそうか？
まだ何もわからねえよ。
Promptly illuminated the hole with a flashlight I had been handed. Damn, it's deeper than I was expecting. The interior of the concrete tube was adorned by poor excuses for handrails. What's worse, there were only a few of them in the upper section, making it impossible to descend the hole with them alone.
天井に穴が開いているみたいだな。
Make out a cavernous expanse just past the end of the tube, which meant this had originally been a vent, if I had to guess.
おーい！聞こえていたら返事をしてくれ！
I yelled into the void. However, time yielded no response. Oh shit, don't tell me they're already... No, they can't be. Satoko Naruto baked that bread just today, so they should still be alive.
その辺に縄ばしごか何かないか？
Raised my head and scanned my surroundings.
これですかね。
Oski presented me with a bundle of ropes. Metal bars between them did indeed identify as a rope ladder.
随分と使い込まれているみたいだな。
Vertical strands of the rope were clearly discolored.
指紋は採取できそうですか？
いや、その必要はないだろう。
Secure the ladder's hooks to the
か
handrails.
なり以前からこの地下が何かに使われていたってことだ。他に縄ばしごを使うようなところもないしな。
死体遺棄のあったここ数年というだけじゃねえな。もっと前から誘拐をしていたってことか。
誘拐とはか。
あ？
Osmi cocked his head.
これは想像に過ぎないんだが、
Mm-hmm.
地下に何かを隠していたんじゃないのか。
何かって何？
Think I would have said spitballing if I knew, man.
例えばだな。鳴子秋行が楽しむための部屋。
Would have surprised me to learn that Akiyuki Naruto had such fetishes in spite of his history with Yusa Katamura.
なるほどな。だが嫁さんが気づかないはずないんじゃねえの。
それもそうだが、共犯あるいは重犯なんだろうな。
I lowered the ladder into the hole as I explained my thought process. However, I didn't feel it hit the floor, even after I had sent it down as far as it could go.
よし、
レイジ、お前が入るのか？
お前のガタイじゃ入れないだろう。それよりも長めのロープを用意してくれ。
Plus, they could also use it to fish me out if needed.
これでいいですか？
I nodded and tied the rope Masuki handed me around my waist.
何かあったら声をかけるからな。
Fortunately, we didn't have one of those small portable radios to complete the ensemble, much as it would have been helpful in this scenario.
おう、無理するんじゃねえぞ。
With that, I delved into the hole. Seemed there really was an old munitions depot down there. I quickly found 3 girls and took them into custody. Though debilitated, they weren't on death's door or anything close. The 3 of them were the only ones there. That said, we also found an old dark red stain in one of the depot's numerous rooms. But I knew now wasn't the time to question any of the liberated girls about it. I went back outside once the girls were brought to the surface. Though the sun had already set, the nautical residence was illuminated by both the dazzling moonlight and a plethora of floodlights. Naturally, that attracted quite the crowd of onlookers.
ご苦労さん。
Osmi presented me with the thermos lid full of coffee.
お、捕まっていた頃の話では。
これから調べさせる。
I sure hope I'm wrong. I took a sip of the coffee.
甘っ。
I should have known coffee from Osmi would beat diabetes in a bottle.
頭が疲れてる時には。
俺は別口で摂取したいんだよ。これもらうぞ。
Figured they could probably handle coffee so long as it was this sweet. It was with that thought I approached the girls, huddled together and snug in blankets, distributed by ambulance workers that finally arrived a minute or two ago. Then I crouched before them and offered them a cup of coffee. Which I was curious to find out what had gone down in that old depot. I knew it better to wait until they'd had some time to calm down first before asking them.
時坂先生、
Almost good. Aimu sprinted over to me.
どうした？
これから彼女たちを病院へ連れて行くそうです。
そうだな。早く会わせてあげた方が。
Though there were 3 individuals who'd be a no-show, of course. The ambulance's revolving lights shone red as they drove away.
さてと。
I returned to the barn that was the current focal point of the investigation. Generator cables were now sticking into the
どう
manhole.
だ？
仕切られた小部屋からフラン死体の痕跡が見つかった。鑑定はまだだが、ここから持ち出したのは間違いないようだな。
ただそうなると、やはり外に出した理由が気になるな。
匂いがひどくなったからじゃねえのか？冬とはいえ、あれだけ腐っていれば大変なことになるだろう。
His way of showing mercy to the girls he was keeping captive, maybe? No, it's just ridiculous.
ざっと調べさせたところ、他に人は残っていないようだな。それと、一箇所だけやけに小綺麗な部屋があるそうだ。
おそらく娘が使っていたんだろう。親に監禁されていたと考えても。
はあ、よくわからねえな、ったく。
Fucking a lot.
俺にだってわからねえよ。
Couldn't possibly imagine who in their right minds would imprison their daughter in such terrible conditions.
昔は伝染病やなんかにかかっている場合、
Osmi's brow furrowed.
そんな様子は見られなかったが。
Illness or not, she certainly had plenty of energy to spare for someone who'd been locked underground for a long time.
まあ、感染症などの検査は要請しておいた方がいいかもしれんが、そんな状況だったら閉じ込める前に医者に見せるだろうよ。
行方不明扱いにしていたから見せられなかった。いや、それでは順序は逆になるか。
Things just weren't adding up. Casually stared at the manhole, only for Mosky to suddenly emerge from it.
なんだ、お前まだ下にいたのか。
捜索の手伝いですよ。あ、それよりも下でこんなのを見つけたんですが。
Mosky showed me a tiny shoe.
そういや、あの子が暴れた際に脱げていたな。
Shoe looked pretty ordinary for a girl her age.
後で届けてやってくれ。
わかりました。これから時坂さんはどうするんですか？
どうするも何も。ここは警察に任せて帰って寝るだけだよ。
明日までにはいろいろまとめておく。
ああ、それじゃ。
Yeah, there's no more date in the corner now. So I think we are locked into the end. Okay, good. And so it was with that, the three girls were rescued. Akiyuki Naruto confessed to abducting and confining the girls, along with disposing of the bodies, but repeatedly denied any and all murder accusations. He also refused to explain why he'd imprisoned the girls, least of all his own daughter. His wife Satoko's interrogation yielded the same results. Only their daughter testified to witnessing her father's crimes. However, her testimony was ultimately deemed inadmissible despite the witness's credibility. The justifications were that not only was she the suspect's daughter, but also too young and her deposition too vague. Meanwhile, Yusuke Tamura was arrested for battery against Satoko Naruto. He insisted they'd been trying to save his niece. One could argue that his niece might never have been found were it not for him. However, he kept mum on how he'd learned how she was being kept beneath the Naruto residence.
そう。よかった。
Sei Maizono hung her head for a while after Masaki finished relaying her the details.
娘さんは現在自宅に帰って以前と同じ生活に戻られています。
ありがとう、まさきくん。
自分は何もしてません。
Masaki shook his head.
じゃあ時坂さんにお礼を言っておいてくれるかしら。
ええ。
Masaki nodded, only to go completely silent.
どうしたの？
いえ。優作さん、お兄さんは本当にメイゴさんの身を案じていたようですよ。
それはどうかしらね。あの人の考えることなんてわからないわ。
Sei shook her head.
でも何もできない私よりはあの子の役に立っているのでしょうね。
Masaki had nothing he could say to refute that.
ねえ、まさきくん。
何ですか？
あの子に会わせてもらえないかしら。
それは自分が判断できることじゃありません。
Masaki shook his head.
田村さんに伝えておきます。これはあなたたちの家族の問題でしょうから。
そうね。
Sei nodded, her head still hung. Train? Oski beheld the scenery passing by the rickety train. He aimlessly stared, counting the number of houses that had already turned on their lights for the evening. Where's Now right now? What is he even doing? How long have I been trying to catch up to him? 6 years? No, it's been longer. Far longer, in fact. It's been going on for as long as I can remember. still haven't succeeded. Suddenly, the old scar on Musky's wrist started throbbing. It always ached whenever it got too cold. However, it was never painful memories that came back to him in those times. Rather, the concerned expression on her face back when she'd been younger. You stop that. You stay away from my girl, damn it. Masaki returned to Shinjuku. To get home, he needed to take the Odakya line from the station.
まさきさん
No. Full sprite. Full sprite with the scarf. Turn that vice to find Yukari standing there carrying a grocery bag. Yeah, fade the text away.
あ、ゆかりさん。
Did I get my screenshot in time? I think I did. Okay.
お仕事ですか？
いや、もう終わったところですが。ゆかりさんは？
私は買い物と家の掃除にと思ったんですけれど、案外片付いていました。
Yukari grinned.
しばらく仕事が忙しかったからじゃないですか？夜遅くまで出ていることも多かったようですし。
きちんと食べておられるのでしょうか？兄さんももういいお年なんですから。
まあ、自分も同年代なんですけどね。
Even Mosky was aware that he and Reiji were no longer what most people would refer to as young men.
まあまさきさんはいいんですよ。
Fine? I'll follow. What exactly is fine?
今日はもう帰られるのですか？
ええ、そのつもりですが。
それでしたら晩ご飯を作りにお伺いしてもよろしいですか？買ってきた量が少し多くなってしまったので。
ああ、それは助かります。何も用意してないんで。
He figured he'd just find some place to eat out.
それでは帰りましょうか。
Oh my god, that's beautiful. Yukari offered Masaki her hand after tapping her chin in contemplation for a few moments.
ええ。
Ah, full sushi. Taking like 3 screenshots. Masaki took stock of the ever so slightly bashful expression crossing Yukari's visage. Damn, I didn't get to read that. I was too busy trying to get a good screenshot. Yeah. Okay. Post credit? No. That is ending the normal ending, right? Should see a gallery along here. Thank you. Alright. Yeah, I kind of went over my usual recording time, but I really wanted to see. I knew I was getting close to the end, so I really wanted to push through and finish it. So, in the next recording session, which Lord knows I will try to make as soon as possible, we will see what is labeled as the grand ending and then the true ending. Because obviously, the way that ended, there's still too many loose ends. We still don't know anything about Rokshiki or Naori. We need to make sure the child comes home safe. So it was a nice enough, like, Mosky got a good ending out of everything, I'd say. Everyone else is just like, I don't like the way it's left unfinished. I don't like the way it's left unfinished. So I can't wait to come back to this and see how we truly wrap everything all up. But that is going to do it for this recording session. It's either going to be a quick transition or a new video, but regardless, I'll see you on the next one. Till then, peace. What is up, everyone, and welcome back to what could be the last recording session of the Shell Part 3, Paradiso. In the previous recording session, we got the normal ending, which was it had some solid moments, but definitely left a lot of things unanswered, but it was supposed to, as there are still 2 more endings we have to get to. So next up is the grand ending, which according to the guide here, there's not going to be a lot of new choices to be made for this ending, but there are going to be a lot of new scenes. So that's what we're going into with this. We're going to see some new stuff, but we're not going to be making a lot of different choices. So, without further ado, let's just jump into it. New game. Chapter 1, Luna. Yeah. See, I did know about this off rip. I will be honest up front, because I tried to open up the game to like go in and get some screenshots for thumbnails and whatnot, and then I clicked start and holy shit, there's new shit. So I had to like, oh fuck, I'm not reading. God damn it. Okay, 1 second. I have to fucking close out because I've been reading. I've been talking. God damn it. Fucking auto scroll text bullshit. This is what I had to do last time too. When I accidentally started playing it. Son of a bitch. Okay. We're gonna load it up again. This time I'm going to shut my mouth and then we'll hit play. So let's go. My parents were surely devastated the moment they brought me into this world. How else could they have felt when faced with such an abomination for a daughter? With the very spawn of Lucifer himself. I'd never asked for any of this. If I had it my way, I would have been just like every other girl out there. So honestly, I'd rather my family had just thrown me to the wolves as soon as they saw me. At least then I would have never known this suffering, this torment. Besides, everyone would be happier that way. Of that, I'm certain. If my sacrifice could bring everyone a tiny extra modicum of happiness, then I'd gladly do it. That was a sentiment I never wanted to lose. And thus, I wish to become an angel. I spent my days in the attic, staring hours on end through a tiny window at the sky I was named for. Those square slivers of the sky were the embodiment of my own limited world. I had been born armless, inhuman. As such, I couldn't hope to survive without the aid of others. I couldn't even do a thing when everyone was struggling to get by through the war. The only ones who helped me were the ones who knew about my condition, my family. However, I quickly learned to do everything with my feet in spite of my lack of arms, which was not as daunting as it sounded, considering I knew no differently. While chopsticks were impossible for me, I could manage a fork. And although it was difficult to write, I was at least able to hold a pencil. Perhaps that was why I followed my sister's footsteps and started drawing. The door to the attic opened, revealing my brother. He was the one who took care of me on a regular basis. In his arms was a basin, brimming with steaming water. After setting it down, he began washing my legs with a warm towel. He thoroughly scrubbed between my toes. It tickled, but I'd long gotten used to the sensation. I sat back and let him do his work, leaning against a futon that had been propped up at an angle so I could sit myself up. Giant wings protruded out my back. I knew they were merely malformed shoulder blades, of course. My whole body hurt whenever I shifted my weight onto them, so I had a pillow against my back. That was how I was finally able to get a look at the sky. Bird. Birds perched on the square frames from time to time. However, they never stayed for more than a moment. They'd flap their wings and soar from one end of the window to the next, before vanishing out of sight. Okay. Alas, I couldn't join them with my defective wings. Thus, I would never take flight, much less soar beyond the frame. I clutched a pencil between my toes. With it, I sketched on paper resting on the floor. The resulting drawing depicted me, reflected in the mirror. At that moment, I thought back to my childhood dream. While I'd long since received a fatal dose of reality, I still wanted to become an angel all the same. Okay, and then the snow falling is where it started the first time around. So, final day of January saw snow in Tokyo. Yeah, this is Toko's memorial, right? Okay. Good. So now that we're done auto-scrolling, I don't really have much more else to say, but now that we're done auto-scrolling, I can actually stop and take a breath and not worry about the game going on without me.
やっと終わった。そんな感じがして。
Yeah, we all know you suck shit, Chizuru. Oh? Oh, we got a red scene. It stopped my skip. We got a red scene. We set out to work in the dead of night, a time when none of the locals would notice. Okay, so this is some, like, behind the scenes. Is this after? I just want to double check. Is this after the painting? I believe so. I'm not entirely sure, but I believe so. Because I gotta imagine this is when Sei and her sister set up the initial thing. First, I lifted a box out of the bed of our truck, parked away from prying eyes in a vacant lot on a back street. Within was a painting I'd drawn. Oh no, this is them this is them putting the, planting the Exile of Paradise, isn't it? Sakura went on ahead and unlocked the door to the studio using a key he must have acquired in advance. See, I didn't think we had gotten to the painting just yet. Yeah. The place was deserted. Shinzo Mamiya, its owner, hadn't been by in nearly 2 years due to his arrest. Incidentally, that was right around when Sasakura had devised his plan. He's old and guilty of terrible misdeeds, so his sentence won't be short. He may even get the death penalty. And even if he manages to fully serve his term, I doubt he'll have the strength left to paint by the time he gets out. So don't worry, there's no one in the world who can tell your work apart from his. Or so he'd said. Was that really the case, though? Could my forgeries fool even their original artist? Honestly, I didn't think so. I wasn't that conceited, but then he died. But now that he was gone, our chance had finally arrived. The studio was littered with boxes full of Shinzo Mamiya's paintings. Attorneys had rounded them all up here after his arrest. So Sakura and I worked in silence, opening the boxes one by one and checking the paintings before replacing them. It was so dark that even I had to pay close attention to tell which ones were the originals. And then when Sakura wasn't looking, I slipped my own work into a box full of swapped paintings. I'd come up with this idea on a whim. I was curious to see how my painting, drawn in imitation of Shinzo Mamiya's style, would be evaluated. Would it be deemed irrelevant and ignored? Or, my painting contained subject matter that hadn't appeared in any of Shinzo Mamiya's art, not to my knowledge anyhow. Anyone who looked hard enough would be able to tell. However, I still believed it could potentially pass for one of his works. Sasakura and I left the studio after eliminating all traces that we'd ever been there. Okay, and that's why Sasakura gets so pissed when he goes to see the painting, right? Because he's like, God damn it, fucking Sei snuck something in without my knowing, that fucking bitch. He was the only one satisfied at present with what we'd accomplished. After all, he'd gotten his hands on Shinzo Mamiya's originals. He could easily make a pretty penny selling them overseas through his underground connections. However, my satisfaction was still to come. What will happen once the painting is found? Little did I know then of the coming tragedy that my actions would instigate. Ooh, okay, so now we're at the painting. Apparently we got something new going on here. These reporters would ruin the day of all the visitors, something wasn't done. It was with that epiphany that Maurice rose to her feet and tried to stop the reporters attempting to storm the painting. But just then... Okay. Maurice noticed someone crying in front of the painting. Perhaps one of the reporters had bumped into her. Worried, Maurice addressed her. The woman jolted and gave Maurice a look before turning around and fleeing. weaving her way through the mob of rubbernecks. Did the painting make her cry? Yes. Maurice looked up at the exile of paradise, illuminated in the sporadic flashes of cameras, wondering just what it was that the woman had seen in the painting. Okay. Interesting little addition. We actually get to see the woman react. Okay, another red scene. I sat all by myself in Sis's apartment. The lights were all off. Sis had exposed me and my condition to the world at large, and yet she'd refused to consult me about her decision at all. Nor did I believe she was taking my grievances the least bit seriously. It was dark. Pitch black, in fact. Darkness consumed my heart from the inside out with each passing second. I have to do something. I have to do something. And fast. And yet, my body refused to move as I wished. Much as I wanted to run away, I couldn't, for that would be a sin. A sin I'd be eternally damned for. But even if that's true, I had chosen this end for myself. There were all sorts of art supplies lying around Sis's apartment. I reeled in one of them, a transparent bottle, with my foot. Inside it was solvent, paint thinner. I used my toes to open the bottle. An acrid stench stung my nose and filled the room. I leaned over and took the bottle into my mouth. The smell was so staggering that I wanted to be rid of it. But I couldn't, for there was something else I yearned to be rid of even more. My own life. Okay. So yeah, that played out exactly how we thought it did. So I guess all the new scenes are essentially just seeing things from the perspective of like the bad guys. I think it's more so Say's perspective primarily. First, I wasn't sure exactly what I was seeing when I returned to my apartment. All I knew was that my sister was on the floor. I raced over and tried helping her up, but her skin was already growing cold by the time I touched her. What in the world happened here? Sora and I had just gotten into a fight, specifically over the painting dubbed Exile of Paradise that had been exhibited at that art museum. Though the public believed it to be an undiscovered piece of Shinzo Mamiya's, it seems Sora had realized right away that it had been a painting I'd done of her. Thus she'd taken me to task for revealing it to the world. Ultimately, the argument concluded with me leaving the apartment to cool my head. I looked down to find an empty bottle by my feet. It had once contained solvent. Did she drink this? I couldn't imagine how unbearably excruciating her final moments must have been. She must have been positively writhing in agony. Did she kill herself to send a message to me? But even though I was faced with my sister's body, a most imprudent idea reared its head. It was a dream that had been resigned to never see fulfilled. To imitate Shinzo Mamiya's masterpiece, Girl in Shell. While the one on show at the museum was, of course, spectacular, the bust version that he'd fashioned out of a bona fide corpse was an entirely different league. Ever since word of it had gotten out, I always wondered if it'd be possible for me to make something like that. Okay, I see. She always wanted to imitate Shinzo's work, but the one thing she never really had the opportunity to imitate was the genuine original Girl in Shell. And that's why she does it this first time around. Okay. That was to say, an angel, modeled after Exile of Paradise. I assembled the tools needed to make an angel, leaving Sora's body where it lay. There were angel feathers, thin bamboo, clay, a pedestal, and red cloth. Though I didn't have Exile of Paradise on me, I knew that painting like the back of my own hand anyway. Alright, time to create the perfect imitation. Damn. That's actually fucking wild. This woman comes home, sees her sister's dead body, and's like, oh hell yeah, this is the perfect opportunity. God damn. Like, we knew Say wasn't all up there in the head, but still. Christ. And another one. Okay, so this is after they discover Sora's body. My destination, the old gallery in Chopu, turned out to be caked in dust from a long period of neglect. I covered the windows with cardboard I found inside so the locals wouldn't know I was here. Unfortunately, that also meant I probably couldn't risk turning on the lights at night either. Okay, right. Because they had to... Since they essentially faked Sei's death, she has to go into hiding. So this is where she hid out, was this old art studio. Gotcha. Regardless, I cleaned the floor, sat down, leaned against the wall. The ice-cold ground chilled me to my bones. However, I couldn't afford to turn the heat on, because then people are going to think someone's there. Thus, I wrapped myself in a dirty blanket. Once I settled in, I took a good look at my hands. They were the very same hands I'd used to mutilate my sister's body. I wanted to grant her last wish. The idea of her deformity being exposed to the world at large had proven to be more than she could bear. Therefore, I couldn't have just left her body as it was. Turning it into a parody of Exile of Paradise had been a good cover. So, why? Why did doing that give me such twisted pleasure? Okay, so you did it the first time, then realized you liked it. Okay. I knew the answer, of course. It was because I'd brought Exile of Paradise closer to the same echelon as Girl in Shell. I turned Exile of Paradise into a statue, much like Girl in Shell had been made into a bust crafted from grave wax. Long had I believed my dream impossible, yet the perfect ingredients to make it reality had been handed to me on a silver platter. So No, that's wrong. I'd made that statue solely to hide her secret. As such, it was my duty to complete the deception. If you want to hide a tree, put it in a forest, as a book had once said. And I'd have to make more angels, so no one would give her body so much as a second thought. Far more angels. Ah, I see. I'll do it. I swear I'll sculpt more angels. For that was the only way to hoist Exile of Paradise up to the same standing as Girl in Shell. Okay. Oh, baby. Another red scene. What do you got for us, Sei? I let out a hushed sigh when faced with the sum of my last few hours' work. Before me was a one-winged fallen angel. My experience from the last one appeared to have carried over, resulting in what I believed to be an improved final product. Though amputating the arms had been a new challenge, I was still satisfied with the ultimate result, I had to say. As an imitation, there was nothing to complain about. Furthermore, the police were apparently under the impression that Soda's body was my own, just as I'd planned. Therefore, that would make this an imitation of my corpse. An imitation of an imitation. As such, I would need to put my heart and soul into crafting an even better imitation next time. Now then, where to put it? It would have to be someplace not too far from here that was practically deserted at night. Fortunately, I had a car to transport my creation. It would get the job done just fine so long as no one caught me in the act. I unfolded a map of the neighborhood on the floor and studied it under a tiny lamp. Something I had to be wary of was that this map was slightly outdated. The Chopu area was presently in the midst of development, turning much of the old fields into residential districts. It wouldn't be good if I went all the way out to what I thought was a deserted area only to find a house there, to say the least. Therefore, I needed a place that would never be redeveloped. Eventually, my eyes centered around the north end of town near the border of Timitaka. A large airfield sat there. If memory served me right, there was plenty of untouched land just off its runway. That should do it. Alright, another scene. What you got for us this time, Sei? I allowed myself a moment of reflection once faced with the completed angel. This makes 2. No, 3? I only knew that the details of the investigation were being reported in the papers, but they likely hadn't figured out I was still alive. After all, my corpse and the corpse they'd found the other day probably looked nearly identical to a layman. Naturally, the police were doubtless looking into my old acquaintances, such as Sasakura. I wonder if he'd seen my body. No, probably not. Though Sora and I looked similar, we were still different. Oh. So Sasakura was not in on this. Interesting. Because I had thought that he was. So even he was fooled into thinking that was Sei. Interesting. Thus, those who knew me on a personal basis would have likely noticed her body wasn't mine, no matter how much work I'd done to disguise that fact. It made me realize I was treading on some very thin ice. After all, if Sasakura told the police that the body wasn't mine, then... No, forget it. Fussing over what-ifs is pointless. Ooh, new red scene. Chie emerged from behind the shrubbery in her front yard when she was sure Reiji's car was gone. Okay, so this is how Chie fucking did what she did. Gotcha. She hadn't managed to get anything out of him on the ride over. However, that was exactly why she was so confident in her suspicions. She was positive that man had been the one who'd killed Sei. Chie retrieved a bag she'd hidden in a thicket. This is it. Today's my only chance. Chie had sensed something that had been off for a while now. How sorry when Sei had abruptly informed her that she was leaving Japan to study abroad, only to constantly deny Chie's insistent pleas to see her off. Then approximately 1 year later, Sei returned, yet seemed more run down than before her trip. Furthermore, she'd been doggedly vague about her time in Italy whenever Chie inquired about it, simply saying that she'd just have to wait and see it for herself someday. That was why Chie had yearned to study abroad. Chie took the Odakyo line from Kyoto Station, transferring at Shimo Kitazawa. If the police caught her now, she'd have no excuses for them. Thus, she kept her head down from start to finish the whole way, taking great care to stand out as little as possible. Eventually, she got off at the last stop, Kichijoji. She knew where to go from here on out. After all, she'd been there numerous times for lessons with Sei. Finally, Chie reached the building adjacent to the railroad crossing on Inokashira Street. The gallery's lights were on. Chie ignored the front door, knowing it'd be locked since business hours had long since ended. Instead, she entered the narrow alleyway by the ditch next to the railroad tracks. Chie took deep breaths after finally reaching the door in the back. There, she procured a thin object wrapped in white cloth out of her bag. She unfurled the cloth until she caught sight of the metallic sheen beneath it. And then, with one more deep breath, she rang the doorbell.
Hi. Are?
Sasakura gave Chie an odd look, almost as if he was disappointed to see her at his door.
お話ししたいことがあるのですが。
どうぞ。
Sakura beckoned Chie into the gallery as his gaze ferociously ravaged the vicinity over and over, like a fugitive on the run. Once inside, Chie put on a pair of slippers Sakura offered her, then went to his room.
何か飲むかい？
いいえ。
She didn't want to leave any traces.
それで何の用事だったのかな？
Sakura's meek smile never once faltered the entire time he
あ
spoke.
の前園先生が。
ああ。
Faint pall of gloom veiled Sasakura's face. Is that the act he's going with?
何があったか。
いや、それが僕にもさっぱりでね。
Sasakura shook his head.
僕が疑われて参ってるんだよ。
それは大変そうなのです。
店もこの先どうなるかわからないからね。
Sasakura heaved a sigh. Now that's a bald-faced lie if I'd ever seen one.
僕が彼女を殺す理由なんて何もないのにね。
本当にそうなのですか。
Chie couldn't rein herself in.
当たり前だろう。仕事にも影響が出るし、それに僕は彼女。
Chie gritted her teeth to hold back the rage that threatened to pour forth from her mouth. Nonsense. You're talking absolute nonsense.
本当に愛し。
Sei had never mentioned anything of the sort to Chie.
当然だろう。
Oh, right. That's right. Chie had a one-sided crush with Sei. That's right. Because that's the thing, like, because Reiji tried to insinuate that they were a thing, and Sei was like, no. She had feelings for me, but I never reciprocated them. So, of course, that's why she gets so mad at Sakura all of a sudden, like, oh, you think you could be with her, huh? So Sakura shrugged. Yeah, she's jealous.
先生を一番愛していたのは私なのです。
Homegirl is jealous.
なあ、彼女にはそういう気もあったようだね。もっともどちらもいけるようだけれども。
そんなこと。
Like, huh, all right. Well, I guess she swings both ways then. I love it. He's not even fazed by it. He's like, oh, yeah, I heard such things. Anyway. Jay wanted to call Sasakura a filthy liar. However, his confidence had shaken her conviction. This scum tarnished Miss Maizono. He'll pay for that.
だったら。
It's now or never. Chie got up and removed her coat.
私もお願いするのです。先生と同じように愛してください。
Cause that makes sense.
冗談だろ。
Like, obviously, that's just her excuse to be naked, clearly, so then she can get to stabbing him. I was curious to see how he'd react, because I'm like, what? That doesn't, like...
冗談なんか
Next, Chia disrobed, leaving her with nothing but her bra and panties. She was shivering like mad, not from the cold either. For a moment's pause, she reached for her bra. Her face was going scarlet from the humiliation. Regardless, she had to go through with it. He won't suspect a thing. Jay stripped off her panties and placed them atop her bag. She seized the opportunity to snatch the white cloth from within and hide it behind her back before rising to her feet. She'd never been nude in front of a man before. As such, she wanted to get this over with as soon as possible. Thus Chie, clad in nothing but her birthday suit, ready to run up to Sakura.
ここは警察に見張られているんだから、うかつなことはできない。
I love how that's the one thing stopping him. He's like, no, I couldn't. The police are watching. Which, I mean, it's a pretty fair excuse, but also, you know, it should be more so like, hey, you're a kid. I'm an old-ass man. Chie
だからほら
froze.
服を着て。ん？それは何だい？
It was then that Sakura noticed Chie was holding something. Oh no. Sakura reached out, his fingers brushing against the cloth. Sakura gasped when he saw the blade concealed within. Chie instantly shook off his grip and rammed into him. Sakura groaned. Something warm dripped onto Chie's hand. It all happened so fast that she hadn't even realized what she'd done.
何を？
Sakura grabbed Chie's head.
先生のか
Chie withdrew herself along with the knife to escape Sakura's grasp. Crimson splotches splattered all over the floor.
誠意は俺じゃ。
Do you seriously think you can fool me after all you've done? Suddenly, Sakura lurched forward and collapsed. He writhed in agony. Miss Maizono must have suffered far worse than this. However, Chie brought her knife into a reverse grip before slamming it down onto the back of Sakura's neck.
先生
Chie offered to say a silent prayer as she beheld the sack of flesh that had once been Sakura. Unfortunately, her work wasn't finished just yet. She rolled Sakura's body over until he was face up, then pressed the knife against his arm. However, even after putting all her might into the blade, she only succeeded in tearing his sleeve. She tried over and over again, yet accomplished nothing but carving through his flesh and drenching herself with blood. It seemed his bones were too sturdy for a knife to saw through. I'm running out of time. Thus, much as she didn't want to, she had no choice but to give up. She dropped the murder weapon before removing the now bloodstained cloth wrapped firmly around it. Thanks to that, she figured she was in the clear, seeing as how she hadn't touched the knife directly. Once that was taken care of, she removed her slippers in a spot the blood had failed to sully, then headed for the bathroom. Man, lesbians be crazy. There she washed all the blood off of herself in the shower. It's done. You can let it all out now, Chie. Here she could cry all she wanted without fear of drawing attention or leaving any visible traces behind on her face.
先生先生
Chie creaked open the back door a crack before slipping out. Sakura had mentioned the police were keeping their eyes on the place. This would have been too risky to leave via Inakashira Street. It was with that thought that Chie stared out into the darkness before her. There were headlights approaching in the distance. Chie audibly gulped. It's okay. The trains are lit, so I'll see them coming before they can run me over. Chie scaled a waist-high fence. Her wet hair chilled her to the bone in this weather. She looked both ways, then ran for her life when she was certain the coast was clear of oncoming trains. Her flight across that single pair of railroad tracks couldn't have lasted more than a few seconds, yet it felt like an eternity. Chie immediately ducked for cover and caught her breath when she'd reached the other side. She then checked Inokashira Street but found no indicators that she'd been spotted. Still, she couldn't bring herself to pass by the gallery, so she instead took a detour bound for Kichijoji Station's north entrance.